Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is once again that time of the week. Oh, what time of the week is it? It's that time of the week where we dig underneath the headlines. We see what's really going on. We talk to activists at the local and national level and call out the establishment on its BS. It is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo or Western Michigan University. So a little bit of well, not necessarily an apology, but I did take last week off. I was down in New Mexico, and well, as it turns out, a lot of stuff happened up here in Kalamazoo while I was gone. Whew, and we are going to be talking about that in depth later on in the show. Right now, we're going to go ahead and kick off our program with a very special guest. This, joining us today, is Andrew, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, Stinavage.
Stinavage. Yeah. Andrew Stinavage from Voters Not Politicians. And for those of you not in the know, it is a very important ballot initiative coming up here in the state of Michigan on November 6th that is going to really take on gerrymandering in perhaps the most substantial way we've seen just about ever here in the state of Michigan. You may have recognized them over the course of the last year and a half out there getting those signatures at all the art hops and public events. But, you know, enough of me blathering on, Andrew. For those at home who maybe aren't as familiar with Voters Not Politicians as I am, can you tell us a little bit, what is Voters Not Politicians all about? And particularly, what is this ballot initiative about that you have worked to get on the November 6th ballot?
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, thanks for having me on, Andy. And so I am... working with Voters Not Politicians, and what we're aiming to do is to pass Proposal 2 this November to end gerrymandering, and that in itself is a fun word that comes about when politicians, not voters, draw the lines, and that's our namesake, Voters Not Politicians, and so just where the situation is right now. Currently, politicians and lobbyists draw voting districts, and they do that behind closed doors. They're not asking anybody, they're not seeking input from anybody, and it just so happens it directly benefits them. They draw these districts for safe seats so that whichever party's in power gets as many safe districts as possible. And so we're working to bring that process into the light of day, to bring transparency to that. One of the key pieces of Proposal 2 is an open comment period. We're going to have town halls across Michigan asking folks, what are your communities and how do you want to be represented? So, imagine that. Yeah. So just simple, just simply asking the people how they want to be represented, and so that's our grassroots effort. So.
Well, I wasn't really aware you guys were doing that particular town hall. I don't know if you call it tactic or strategy or outreach, I guess, which really strikes me because, one of the big indictments of gerrymandering is that it ends up producing disproportionate representation. I was wondering, could you maybe describe to the listeners at home exactly how that ends up working where, say you can get more votes for, say, a politician from a particular party, but end up getting represented from somebody or represented by somebody from the other?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's all sorts of ways to gerrymander, if you will, or to and so the two basic ways of doing it is stacking and cracking. And so what they can do is, an example being there's, Democratic-leaning communities. In the first example, stacking, they'll load them all into a single district, And so they'll load them into a single district. And so, with our system, you only need 51% of the vote to win an entire district. So it could be solidly 70, 80%. And so then all the surrounding districts around that would be Republican-leaning districts. And then on the other side of it is cracking. So the other example being, there's a strong Republican communities. Cracking would be dividing them up between 4 or 5 different districts, so that there's no one district has strong Republican communities, and so then you have 4 or 5 leaning Democrat districts.
And, do you think, this is a little bit of a broader question, but does that kind of play into a lot of political divisiveness that we see today? When you have a system set up that way, where politicians get to kind of choose their own voters, it kind of constructs an electoral environment where all you have to do is really play to your base. And I've heard a lot of people kind of complain that because of that, they're not really trying to appeal to all of the constituents in their district, just the ones that will give them that, let's say it's a Republican, give them that conservative electoral advantage.
Sure, certainly, and I appreciate you bringing that up because, a lot of people are looking at politics today, and it's pretty frustrating. There's a lot of divisiveness, a lot of partisanship, and there's a lot of things that contribute to that. But one of the major pieces is gerrymandering. What I look forward to with this Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission that you'll see in November is that you'll see more competitive elections. You'll see, and one of the key pieces is having communities of interest. And so, places like Kalamazoo will be in a single district, and there'll be representatives devoted to our community. And so, what happens with gerrymandering is you have these disparate communities brought together under a single district. An example being the congressional district currently that includes parts of Grand Rapids and Battle Creek, oftentimes around Kalamazoo we have education events, and we ask folks does Grand Rapids have similar interests to Battle Creek, especially as compared to Kalamazoo? And plenty of people answer no, and that's because 30, 40 years ago, Kalamazoo and Battle Creek were a part of a single congressional district, and then back in the 80s that was broken up, and so you can see plenty of repercussions because of gerrymandering, at the local level and across the state.
So could you break down a little bit more, what is this ballot proposal proposing that voters, not politicians, have fought for? How would this kind of new system for drawing district lines be preferable to the system that we have now, and how would it kind of solve some of these problems that we've been talking about?
Sure. Let's see here. Well, so the proposal is to have an independent commission of 13 commissioners, 4 Democrat, 4 Republican, and 5 nonpartisan, unaffiliated, that would meet once every 10 years after the census data comes into Michigan to draw the state house, state senate, and congressional districts. And they meet solely to draw these maps, and then once they're drawn, they're disbanded, and then in another 10 years, there's a group of commissioners that come about, and to ensure that impartiality, it looks very similar to jury duty. So that means you or I, Andy, we could apply. Anybody in Michigan could apply to be a commissioner. The only people that are excluded from it are those who have held public office or are related to somebody that's held public office, and then after that, there's a bit of a selection process. Where either party will eliminate names that they feel are partisan, or they would believe to somehow they wouldn't do the job, and as long as any commissioner kind of meets the criteria that the Secretary of State sets out, they can be a commissioner. and those commissioners have an 8-point criteria, among which is the crucial piece is community of interest, is maintaining those communities. Kind of going back to what I was explaining before with Kalamazoo and Battle Creek, like maintaining, that shared community, as well as other criteria as well. So
I assume that all of the legislators in the Michigan State House and people in our state government are super excited about this ballot proposal and just can't wait for it to pass. Am I right? Or is it? Yeah.
Well, there's plenty of proponents, across the spectrum. We're fairly lucky that locally there is a former Congressman Joe Schwartz, former Republican Congressman Joe Schwartz that speaks on behalf of Voters Not Politicians. Then also Sean McCann, who's running for state senate here in Kalamazoo, he has proposed legislation in the past and is very active with our work as well. So. Yeah,
and so I did want to mention that specifically because I'm glad that you brought up. It's got a lot of transpartisan support. Excuse me, because this is more of a kind of a lefty talk show, but there are a lot. Yeah, like you said, there are a lot of prominent local politicians, both Democrats and Republicans, who support this measure, and even at the national level, people like Arnold Schwarzenegger that use their national platform to speak up about it. Now, what kind of resistance has Voters Not Politicians seen, or I guess I should say pushback against this ballot proposal?
Sure. Well, yeah. So anytime you are, proposing an initiative that's, that changes the status quo, there are, vested interests that have paid a whole lot of money to maintain the system as is. And so we certainly expect opposition. And, when I've talked to people, I've gotten the opportunity to canvass in neighborhoods across Kalamazoo. And what's really encouraging is that, as soon as I give an explanation to folks about our proposal, they really resonate with that message. And so, when it comes to those special interests, I just say bring it on.
Yeah. We're joined now by my co-host Lawrence, who just stepped into the studio.
What up?
Yeah, so we're down one mic, by the way, just letting you know.
That's one sec.
That's okay. It's coming up in November, this ballot proposal. We've got a couple other high-profile ballot proposals going on. Legalization of marijuana, for example. Yeah. And I was just curious, how has it been going as far as, public awareness of this subject? I know when it first started, one of the big concerns is, how many people really know about gerrymandering? So how's that outreach been going? And, what have Voters Not Politicians been doing, since their initial work gathering their signatures to kind of spread awareness of the ballot proposal and gerrymandering more generally?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, since that ballot signing drive, we had over 425,000 signatures last year, which was incredible. And we brought that to the State Board of Canvassers, and those signatures were at 93% validity. And that speaks to so many things. It speaks to the energy within Voters Not Politicians, as well as the work of all these volunteers. So so typically, within this arena, a lot of ballot proposals, the best they see is maybe 70 or 80% validity with those signatures, and that validity is just that those are registered voters and citizens of Michigan and also Kalamazoo, and so that speaks a lot to this volunteer-driven initiative, considering many other ballot proposals and many people within politics were telling the organizers that we needed to have paid canvassers and paid circulators, and so we were able to get that done. And since then, we've been out in the neighborhoods, going door to door, and there's still plenty of work to do. There's polls saying that there's about 30%, about a third of people that still aren't aware of it. But I'm always encouraged to, when I talk to people, once we can, share that message, that they're on board 100%. So.
All right, fantastic. And I'm kind of running out of many other questions. I don't know, Lawrence, you might have something.
Yeah.
How did voters, not politicians, feel about the ballot initiative that the GOP just shut down recently here in Michigan? There was a minimum wage and let me pull up the story.
Yeah.
The story, Kyle Kulinski from Secular talked about it, and there was a ballot initiative for a minimum wage and tip workers raise over in Detroit that was going to be on the ballot, and it was a ballot initiative that a tip worker fought for, and the GOP passed it into law now so they could repeal it after the elections.
Well,
you didn't hear about the story?
I'm not familiar with that situation. With that ballot proposal.
Let me read it for you. I'll say it. Kyle Kulinski from Secular Talk and a couple other people in independent media covered the story. It was paid sick leave for workers, and it was paid sick leave and tip wage increase. The GOP lawmakers, legislators. Wait a second. GOP lawmakers who control the state legislative,
right,
have prevented them from being put on the being put to a vote, while also giving the lawmakers a straightforward way of derailing them. If it was a go-to. Now, in Michigan, overturning a ballot referendum put by the voters requires 3/4 majority of legislators. By passing the measurement now and scrapping the referendum, Michigan legislators can now derail it with a simple majority vote.
Yeah, that's an interesting situation, and yeah, I may not be able to speak directly as to how VNP feels about that, but voters not politicians face their own opposition, and it comes in forms of many different ways. And so there was a Michigan Supreme Court challenge back over the summer, and that was able to be overturned, but. That opposition that was faced was due to the fact that there was a case brought against voters, not politicians, that it was changing too much of the Michigan Constitution, and they made the argument that they needed to take it to a constitutional convention. They needed to bring all citizens of Michigan together in order to do this, as well as we were fortunate that it wasn't. That was overturned because, frankly, the ballot proposal itself is quite targeted and quite limited in the fact that it's changing redistricting and how that's done, and so it wasn't really to that extent. But
if they were to bring you to a constitutional convention, it would be interesting to have voters, not politicians, fight for a constitutional amendment for Michigan to get money out of politics. I think that would be awesome. They're
all of those issues are certainly interrelated. That's definitely true.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I'm glad you brought that up because, like you said earlier, there are a lot of people who are part of the quote unquote status quo who really don't want to see this kind of change happen. And, like I said, it's not very dramatic as far as changing the Michigan Constitution, but it could dramatically change the way that we're represented here in the state. So just kind of curious, you mentioned a little bit before about the history of these districts. What would change, like, say, here in District 6, if we didn't have this kind of partisan gerrymandering that we have had for so long?
Sure. There's plenty of local examples of gerrymandering, and then what that can mean for people here in Michigan, or Kalamazoo, and at Western. And so I mentioned, congressionally, that, 40 some odd years ago, Battle Creek was kind of cut out of the same congressional district that Kalamazoo was in. And so that means, and there's certainly ties there. I mean, there's shared chambers of commerce, there's, an airport as well. And so since then, the argument can be made that, local needs of Battle Creek aren't met, or aren't met as well as they could have been. And then there's other, episodes of gerrymandering. So the most recent 20th State Senate District includes the Kalamazoo County, and exclusively Kalamazoo County, which is kind of rare among state Senate districts. Well, prior to 2011, it had this little kind of tooth, if you will, or like a little cleft, I guess, that included Van Buren County, which just so happened to include the home of State Representative Tanya Shoemaker.
Ooh.
And so then, after the 2011 redistricting, it eliminated her, or it cut out that little wedge, and so she was part of the 26th State Senate District and ran for that. And so there's episodes like that. And so what's exciting with Proposal 2 is that this really encourages it encourages a more direct accountability for our legislators, for our politicians. And so that means solutions that cross that cross the gambit when it comes to fixing our roads, our schools, handling the PFAS contamination that was discovered in parchment. When politicians have to listen to all of their constituents, then we can really see some genuine change, and for all of that. So.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Andrew. And if people want to find out more about Voters Not Politicians, the ballot proposer, get involved, how can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to the website, votersnotpoliticians.com, all one word, no hyphens. And there you can have the choice. You can help out any way you can, whether that's donating or volunteering, and however you want to help. Just make sure to vote November 6th or absentee ballot. And vote yes on Proposal 2.
Yeah, tell all your friends as well. All right. So I think about time to go to a break. I don't know, Lawrence, did you have any other questions? No. All right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for tuning in. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
WIDR would like to remind you to please drive safely. Drunk driving not only puts your life in danger, but the lives of others as well. If you find yourself stranded somewhere, consider calling Drive Safe Kalamazoo, phoning a friend, or having an Uber pick you up. Thank you for listening.
You're listening to WIDR 89.1 FM. Robot, oops, me. Radio Evolution. Stay tuned.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So once again, big thank you to Andrew from Voters Not Politicians for coming on to speak up and talk about that very important issue. Joined now by my co-host Lawrence.
Yo, what up?
Yep. And let's jump into some more kind of local Michigan politics. This was another kind of shocker that happened while I was away down in New Mexico. But
you missed a bunch of stupid.
I sure did. Oh man, oof.
Yeah.
But so there's some very interesting people who have decided to back Gretchen Whitmer. Now who are we talking about? Like, is it like, did she get an endorsement from like Bernie Sanders or like DSA or some left leaning organization? Or
even
something.
the PCCC. Did the PCCC endorse her? Nah. It wasn't none of that. Nah.
But hey, guess what? This reminds me of something Chuck Schumer once said. For every progressive endorsement you don't get, you'll get an endorsement from some of the worst Republicans in the state of Michigan. Oh, man.
Oh.
Now, for those of you who haven't heard, so there's a coalition of Republicans who have come out publicly to endorse Gretchen Whitmer over Bill Schuette. And that includes our current governor, Rick Snyder, and some of the other ones said, including the WWJ Lansing Bureau Chief Tom Skubic, some other high-profile people, and including the Snyder administration, Jim Havman, Lansing attorney Richard McClellan. He served on the transition team with Schuette when he was elected Attorney General. Yeah, again, it's as it says in the article here, there's no Democrats on the team. It appears to be mobilized by causes not exactly close to a liberal's heart, or a left-leaning person, I should add. One member of the group explained that they don't like it that Schuette, as Attorney General, charged 15 former and current Flint and state officials with criminal wrongdoing in the Flint-led contaminated water crisis. Some believe the criminal charges to be politically motivated. There's also a question about whether Schuette supports the kind of prison, quote-unquote, reform efforts that other Republicans do. What some call reform, others call privatization and outsourcing, and believe that it leads to safety failures and loss of good-wage jobs. So, I think, Lawrence, you got a lot to say about this, but let me just ask you real quick. So, does this help or hurt Gretchen Whitmer, in your humble opinion?
In my humble opinion, they have not learned a damn thing since 2016. Like, this is absolutely the wrong way to go in Michigan. Like, it doesn't make sense that you're not. It makes me laugh that Gretchen really believes that being a centrist neoliberal corporatist is going to help her win Michigan when a centrist neoliberal corporatist did not win Michigan in 2016. It doesn't make sense that in her own race she had a real progressive and someone who pretended to be a populist progressive, and they basically split the vote so she can win.
Oh yeah, no. Let's not forget about that.
Yeah,
Shree the spoiler. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, okay, it plays into her narrative. If you've ever seen any of her commercials on TV, that she can reach across the aisle, she can get things done. She's been there for a long time. She understands the issues. Here's the problem. When you're agreeing, when we hear about bipartisanship, it usually means that the establishment and our political sphere are agreeing to screw over the average American. Because let me tell you what was bipartisan: deregulating Wall Street recently, earlier this year. Increasing the military budget higher than what it was in during the Iraq and Afghanistan war. What was also another thing that was also bipartisan was what was the other? There was another bill that happened recently that also got Democratic support.
Talking about the thing that weakened Glass-Steagall?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's amazing that you have these Michigan politicians, especially Miss Whitmer, who needs progressive votes. She needs the liberal base, and she's literally doing everything in her power to not do so.
And you know, I really, this is gonna backfire so hard. And you know, here's what I'm thinking. So like, shaking hands with Rick Snyder. He's one of the most unpopular governors in Michigan history. Been vilified at a national level for how he handled the Flint water crisis. And so the day after this came out, I paid attention to my Facebook feed. And, you know, I've got a lot of friends who are like activists out in Flint. And they were on fire. They were like, how could this woman accept this endorsement from Governor Snyder? A lot of them saying they're either going to stay at home or vote for Jane Kirkland, you know. And
then they're gonna blame those voters. Yeah. They're gonna blame those voters the same way that they did in 2016.
Why'd you sit at home?
Why? No. Why did you vote third party? Yeah. Why did you? Yeah. Why did you? You hurt Michigan because you either didn't want to participate or you voted for the candidate that's just as corporate and monstrous as the people that she's supposed to be fighting against.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, to the people of Flint, Governor Snyder is a monster. Most of the people in his administration are, man, because, like, they let a city... No, not even let. It was Rick Snyder's emergency financial management policies that directly led to the poisoning of Flint. And to see her like come out onto the public stage and build an alliance or shake hands with this guy, it's sickening to those people. I mean, it's sickening to a lot of people in the state of Michigan. It almost reminds me of, like, you remember, you know, back in the 2016 election, a lot of people gave Hillary Clinton heat for, like, talking about being friends with Henry Kissinger. Yeah. It's like that level. Yeah. It is that, yeah, like, Governor's not, I don't know if he's quite as bad as that, but he'd certainly be up there with, like, the Henry Kissinger of Michigan.
He definitely is. Let me remind everybody that that year where they finally declared Flint an emergency, ISIS that year only killed 10 American soldiers. The Rick Snyder administration killed 13. They killed 13
ISIS.
And poisoned.
You got to get those numbers up, ISIS. Those are rookie numbers.
And poisoned an entire city. So let's not forget. And even the aftermath of the fact that, and this is actually something that I want to talk about because Michael Moore just came out with a film, Fahrenheit 11/9, and he talks about how Michigan did not vote for Hillary and how President Obama and Hillary, when they were talking about the Flint water crisis, when President Obama came here and did that fake press release saying that fake publicity.
Well, look, everybody, I'm gonna drink this glass of water.
Yeah. That the fact that she didn't campaign in Michigan to rally progressive votes. It was Bernie Sanders that went to Michigan and Wisconsin to get.
And don't forget Cher.
Yeah. And that came to Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana to get votes. And he talks about it in his movie Fahrenheit 11/9. I advise everybody to go see it because it's awesome. But the thing that pisses me off about Miss Whitmore is that the policies that she talked about during her debates with Abdul and Cherie, she doesn't talk about those policies in any of her ads. The reason why is because a majority of those policies goes against her base. She's not for full-throated Medicare for all, single-payer healthcare. She's I don't remember if she's for, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that she's for universal free college and tuition.
Oh, no. She does have a policy plank about trade schools, but it's not really all that different from what the Republicans are proposing, is it, you know?
Right. Mm-hmm. So we're not going to address student loan debt. We're not addressing the fact that college tuition is just as high as mortgages.
Especially in a state like Michigan that has so many major public universities, you know, that is a hot button issue here in the state, and it is pretty much being completely ignored.
I mean, she gets the endorsement of unions, so she's a working people's her ad says that she's for the working people. Well, the overwhelming majority of the country wants universal health care. 70% in the last poll that I saw said that Republicans, Democrats, and just Americans want universal health care. If you're for the working people and you're not for universal health care, you're not for the working people.
Well, I mean, it reminds me a little bit of, you remember what happened in California? So they were on the verge of getting statewide, basically a Medicare for all model for the state of California. They hypothetically, they had all the votes to do it, but the Democratic governor shot it down, as did several key people in the state Senate. Now, here's what Gretchen Whitmer has said about like Michicare, like the Michicare for all that like Abdul's proposed. She said we could never pass it in this current legislature. She basically called it ponies. It's like we can't possibly do that right now. We shouldn't discuss it. We need to talk about healthcare, quote unquote, access. But it does make me wonder if she had that majority, if she had the power to do it, kind of like Obama did after he got elected in 2008, would she? And I mean, there's a lot of Blue Crosses and Blue Shields that make me wonder if she actually would or not.
Are you kidding me? She's taking just as much money from the private insurance industry as any other Michigan State legislator. Like, no, she's not gonna give up that gravy train. Like, the reason why is because it would affect their bottom line, and affecting their bottom line will affect her income, will affect how she gets these legalized bribes. Is she gonna go against that? No. It goes back to what we talk about on the show all the time. It goes back to money and politics, and it also goes back to people's priorities. Her priorities, even though it says it's for the working people, when you look at her platform, her policies are not going to positively goes against not only her base, but it also goes against what the overwhelming majority of American people want. And yes, there are degrees and levels to how bad the Republican alternative is. This is not an endorsement for him, because he's an absolute disgusting monster who was also endorsed by President Trump and Rick Snyder at one point. We're not gonna again. It's upsetting that Rick Snyder was in a television ad for the person that Gretchen Whitmer is running against, and now Rick Snyder and some people in his administration are now backing Gretchen Whitmer.
Yeah, no, that definitely is quite troubling. Yeah.
That's like saying, I was vegan. I was vegan, and I continue to be vegan. Mm-hmm. Now let me go get this Philly cheesesteak with bacon on top. You know what I'm saying? Like,
well, I mean, it's one thing to like this endorsement. Like, it comes from a guy who piloted the worst experiment in like conservative privatization, economic thought in American history, and he's looking at Gretchen Whitmer and being like, you know what, I could settle for endorsing her. And he's like, no, that just, I do not see in what universe that helps Gretchen Whitmer at all. And the fact that she would even accept it without having that like in her thought process speaks a lot to that kind of obliviousness. And to her credit, I thought she was a little bit more savvy, like looking back on some of the debates, thinking about realizing you're going to need to court the leftists and the progressives to really push through in November. But it's like you said, Lawrence, it's like these folks just haven't learned anything.
It goes back to the thing that we talked about on the show before. The Republicans cater to their base. No matter how horrible of a policy that they are asking for, they cater to it. They cater to their base need. The Democrats condemn their base. They vote shame their party, their people into voting for me by saying, hey, I'm not as bad as the other ones. Yeah. So imagine that in any other context. In any other context, you go to Subway to go get some food, right? And Subway's like, yeah, we got cockroaches and rats running around our restaurant, but hey, we're not as bad as the other sub shop who who likes to deport that likes to separate families from children. You're not as bad as the people who support separating children from their family members, but you still got roaches and cockroaches, bro.
Like, well, and you know, like the thing that just like boggles my head about it too is like, so I mean, it's great that you brought up that, like, you know, Republicans do cater to the base, and you know, a great example of this is, you know, Donald Trump talked about like building a wall in his campaign, and it was a stupid and grandiose idea. It would cost millions or billions and billions and billions of dollars. He gets the nomination. All of a sudden, all of the Republicans are like, "Yeah, we're totally. Let's build a wall. Let's do it. Let's do it."
No, and you have Democrats also trying to use that as leverage.
Yeah.
And saying, "Hey, we will give you money to fund your wall. If you give us the crumbs off your table, like, you know, backing DACA, which 86% of the country wants to do. You know, bringing back net neutrality, 85% of the country wants. 82% of the country, like over 80. What was it? The last polling from Pew Poll Research, it was like 84% of Americans want CHIP to be funded. Like, are you kidding me?
It's like, it's exactly it. Because the Republicans are like, "Oh, you want that wall? Here's the red meat. We're going to throw red meat all over the place. You're going to have so much red meat. It's going to be great." And then the Democratic base is like, "Hey, can we have this thing where we have like universal health care? You know, like how every other Western country in the world operates? Proposals that is popular among both Democrats and Republicans." And the Democrats are like, "That's pie in the sky stuff."
But how are you going to pay for it?
How are you going to pay for it?
Did you not see? Okay, and this goes to another topic that I know we want to talk about. Did you see the interview with Jake Tapper and AOC?
Oh, you know, I heard about it. What was it? He was he asking about Medicare for all, or is it?
Okay, so for those that have not seen it, and this is something that I know we wanted to talk about before. Jake Tapper, who did the BS fact check on Medicare for all using the Markovio study, which is paid for by the Koch-funded university study. He tried to fact check Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders, and he got it so demonstratively wrong that the video had to get re-edited and taken down, and it was still massively wrong. Still. So he brings Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on the show, and he ambushes her by saying, "Well, the policies that you're asking for would cost $40 trillion, or like this made-up number that CNN put together." And they're saying, "Well, we added all these things up from left-winged studies, and it still had the Markovio study on there, a right-wing study, which proved in its study that Medicare would save the average American $2 trillion. So it boggled my mind, the smugness and condescension that he was giving towards her when she was answering the questions in detail. And the thing that bothered me the most is he doesn't keep that same energy when it comes to Rick Santorum or Ted Cruz or any of the other establishment people, not on the right but on the left. He will only bring that kind of energy to AOC or Bernie Sanders, and then does not give context on how her policies not only will affect our GDP, but how they're going to get the money for it. I mean, it made me angry, and it also made me realize why we do this show.
Exactly.
I was sitting there like, how is it that me, Andy, Luke, and Nora have more information on these issues than CNN, and they're a major media company? We have our smartphones and laptops.
I mean, they're all very educated people, but you get paid $30,000 a day. you get a little bit more comfortable skewing the facts. Or, what you mentioned is a really good point. You have somebody like Jake Tapper or any of the other like big MSNBC or CNN analysts, and time again, you'll see conservatives on there just saying the most ridiculous stuff that is like not factual, talking about in terms of like issues like climate change, et cetera, and there'll be kind of like this neutrality bias where they'll accept it's like, oh yes, okay, fair point. Now to the other side of the argument, Bill Nye Science Guy, could you please explain to us why we are all doomed?
I mean, there's other issues that I know that we wanted to talk about. I definitely wanted to speak on Kavanaugh. I know that was something that me and you want to talk about. Mm-hmm. I know that we also want to talk about the encampment and that whole debacle. But yeah, before we take our break, because it's almost 6 o'clock, I just want to say the blue wave recently, because recent polling just came out. Polling 3 months ago said that the Democrats have in majority of matchups, the Democrats have a 8-point lead on their GOP counterparts. Recent polling came out last weekend, and the Democrats have a 12-point lead against Republicans. And our president keeps saying that there's going to be a red wave. And it's like, nah, bro. It's going to be a blue tsunami and a red wedding. It's going to get very ugly when it comes to our federal and national politics, because
or a red wave of democratic socialists.
The thing that's happening, and the thing that makes it funny is that we have democratic socialists, we have progressive, we have angry progressives, we have a lot of movement happening on our in our country, and you see that even with the Kavanaugh hearing, they want to push him through before they lose power. Mm-hmm. They're trying to shove his confirmation through before they lose power, because Beto O'Rourke might mess around and beat Ted Cruz. You have so many high-level officials who are going to get wiped out. Mm-hmm. The IDC got wiped out, like in New York. It's an amazing thing. It made me smile earlier this week, but at the same time, I'm sitting here like it's upsetting, because we have people like Gretchen Whitmer and other neoliberals who are messing it up for everyone else.
Yeah, and it's like you said, the Republicans are allowed to offer everything in the sky to their base. Here, I'll give you a big poofy castle made of candy and racism, and Democrats are like, no, you this is the way things are. If you don't want things to get more terrible, vote for someone else. And that's Gretchen's whole thing. She's like, exactly what we have now, but I'll try to fill in some potholes. Because, that's her whole campaign kit. So, fix the damn roads, which every election since I have been old enough to be able to see campaign commercials, every Democrat and Republican candidate for governor has promised to do exactly that. And
my thing is that she's been in the legislature for 14 years. You ain't fixed the damn potholes yet. like you've been in the body politics of Michigan for 14 years. You still ain't did you. What makes you think that not fighting for things like free college tuition, ending the wars, a living wage, Medicare for all, a new infrastructure deal, legalizing marijuana, legalizing, taxing, and regulating marijuana. How are these things not a part of your platform, and you honestly believe that you're going to win Michigan, and you're getting the endorsements of people that Michiganians hate? Mm-hmm. I got the endorsement of the farmer bro who just raised the price on insulin. Are you gonna vote for me? No, we don't like him.
It'd be like if Hillary came out and was like, "Hey everyone, guess what? Richard Nixon's ghost just endorsed me. He was a great guy. He created the EPA.
Right.
Don't remember?
Right. I just got the medical endorsement from Jack the Ripper. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Hey, he knows a lot about anatomy. He knows his stuff.
Like, but this is my point. Okay, so Miss Whitmore, if you are listening to this, I don't know if you're listening to this. I don't know if you're political.
Maybe one of her low-level staffers.
Yeah, I don't know if you're
talk shows from West Michigan.
Yeah, I don't know if any of your staffers are listening to this.
Hey, intern, listen up.
Look. We're not trying to bash you. I would like to see you win because I think you're better than the Republican alternative. With that being said, if you're not pushing policies that your base wants, you are going to lose. You're going to lose just like Hillary Clinton. I need you not to Hillary Clinton this election up, okay? I need you to look at some polling because polling indicates that an overwhelming majority of Americans want progressive policies. If you're not fighting for them, you will lose.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, like again, and some of them she has on the book. Why isn't she more vocal about her demand for a $15 minimum wage? That's on her platform. She could put it in her commercials, but I haven't seen it. Yeah.
God. But yeah, all right. It's 6 o'clock. We got.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take a break. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Wider FM
shows the way toward disinhibition, freedom, and how to release our spirits from self-imposed prisons.
Radio Evolution. Are you trying to get your local business's name out to the WMU and Greater Kalamazoo communities? Why not do so while supporting Radio Evolution through underwriting and donations? For more information, please visit widerfm.org.
Stay tuned for Wider's weekly RSO Spotlight
on WIDR Kalamazoo.
Residence Housing Association is a RSO on Western Michigan's campus that enhances leadership skills and gets you involved in the community. My name is Fanny Wasanda and I'm the Vice President. Resident Housing Association has meetings on Tuesdays in the President's Dining Room starting at 7 p.m. Our Fall Leadership Fair is coming up on October 13th in room 1910 of Sangren starting at 1 o'clock. We'll be offering sessions on leadership related to self-care and professional development. For more information about RHA, visit wmurha.webs.com.
This has been our weekly RSO Spotlight on WIDR Kalamazoo.
For more information on how to spotlight your RSO, head to widrfm.org.
dissidents who are trying to improve the system. Take a look at this. The Massachusetts State Police accidentally revealed surveillance of progressive political groups in a social media post on gas explosions in Lawrence, North Andover, and Andover. WBUR reports. The police posted an image of 39 gas explosion locations, but the screen grab of the police computer indicated the browser's bookmarks bar. The post showed police had booked pages for Massachusetts Action Against Police Brutality, the Coalition to Organize and Mobilize Boston Against Trump, and other activist organizations. Police were also monitoring a resistance calendar of anti-Trump protests. Cade Crockford, director of the Technology for Liberty program at the Massachusetts branch of the ACLU, slammed the revelation. I wasn't surprised, but I was appalled, Crockford told WBUR. American law enforcement has, for a very long time, targeted dissidents. A lot of people like to believe those tactics ended, but that's not true. And actually, after 9/11, they've seen a substantial resurgence. So, this is a stark reminder of what law enforcement has traditionally done in this country. They spied on Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and they tried to ruin him. Remember, it was the FBI that famously sent a letter to Martin Luther King saying, "We know about your affair, you should kill yourself." Malcolm X, they tried to find similar dirt, but it turns out he was not cheating on his wife, so they didn't have anything in that respect. But he also his life ended in an assassination. It's an open question as to whether or not it was actually. They say it was definitely the Nation of Islam that did the hit. Some people even say Louis Farrakhan, but I don't know who it is. All I know is there's a question as to whether it's them or could be our law enforcement agencies. But there's a history of spying on dissidents and people who are trying to, implement social change. And what's super annoying is that later on, everybody pretends, like with Martin Luther King Day, like, oh yeah, Martin Luther King's a hero. And the implication is we always knew he was a hero and he was always heralded that way in society. And that is not true. That is not.
Testing. Ah, yes, we are back. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So, that was a piece by Kyle Kalinske, and, that was basically talking about state surveillance of leftist groups. It is not in the past tense. It is still going on. That COINTELPRO type BS is just as alive today as it was in the 1960s. And, it strikes me particularly hard, as somebody who was at Standing Rock. It's one of the most transparent examples we have of this kind of state-directed surveillance that treats activism as basically terrorism. That's, how... Yeah. Be careful if you're out there out there organizing. I remember when I was doing stuff with a group called Democracy Spring, they said, well, the fact that we only do peaceful stuff, that's what protects us. And even at the time, I remember thinking, oh man, that you do not know.
I mean, it also goes into what happened with Black Lives Matter when they would have protests and they have agitators in the crowds. It also happens with in what Kyle was talking about with Dr. Martin Luther King. People forget that it was the FBI and the CIA that not only hacked Dr. Martin Luther King's phone, but they also hacked Malcolm X's too, and they told Martin Luther King, we know about the affairs, we know about what you're doing, you should kill yourself. That's literally what they said to Dr. Martin Luther King, who, wanted things like universal basic income and wanted criminal justice reform.
What dangerous ideas those were.
He wanted black people to, have civil rights and not, he wanted poor people to get a living wage. Like, yeah, these are so scary to the establishment, and that video reminded me. It reminded me of a quote from Martin Luther King that I like to use a lot, and I think about it a lot. He says, "You know, it didn't cost America 1 penny to integrate lunch counters. It didn't cost America 1 penny to desegregate buses. As a matter of fact, they made money from desegregating. But when it comes to the redistribution of economic equality to people who have been disenfranchised and who's been run amok and bamboozled by our system, when it comes to giving back dignity and humanity to Americans who have not received such things, now it becomes a problem, because now you're affecting the bottom line of those that are in power who benefits from the system that we have.
So it's about 6:15. I want to jump on a local topic that, man, if I were here last week, I'd probably spend at least like an entire hour talking about. And the only reason I'm not spending a tremendous amount of time on it is because I feel like most people in the community have already heard about this issue, but there's definitely still some stuff I want to say about it. I guess anybody who doesn't know, the Bronson Park Freedom Encampment, who've been fighting for the demands of the homeless community, was evicted on last Thursday. Initially, they said they were going to be clearing out the park Wednesday night at 7 p.m. and dozens and dozens of supporters. Well, Lawrence, you were actually down there. I was in New Mexico last week. About how big was the crowd down there to come support the homeless folks?
I mean, it was a pretty big crowd, man. It was more than what I expected. It was like the best way to describe it was like when Pokemon Go was a thing and everybody was outside. It was a pretty big crowd. I would say about 75, maybe 100 people was there. Like people came and then they left. And basically, our local police department and our local council did not want to arrest all those people that were downtown, so they chose to evict the people that were living in the park at 6:30 the next morning.
That's
so
right. I believe it was about 14 people ended up getting arrested.
Yeah, including our
civil disobedience.
Yeah, including our commissioner, Miss Shannon. Miss Shannon, like, there's a lot of people who just talk to talk. I have to give mad props to her. Because she really put her body on the line. She put herself on. She was there on the forefront. I know people were saying that it was for publicity and things like that, but nah, dog. When you're about that life, you're about that life, and she definitely is. So I give her mad respect. If I could drop one of Clue's bombs for her, I would.
I want to clarify somebody. Like, I keep up with a lot of like local activism and local politicians. I know she personally has been on the fence about even running again as a city commissioner. And some people was like, oh, is this to like jump off to like run for mayor or something? Because, Bobby's not running again. And no, I think it is because she genuinely cares about the issues. She's down there sleeping in the park with the folks. And, trying to use her platform in the right way. There were a couple of, if there's any criticisms I would lobby, it was about specific choices about individuals in the park. I'm not really going to get into all of that right now, but for the most part, I'm really happy that somebody, it's kind of like that old, Henry David Thoreau once had a conversation with Emerson, a couple old white guys who wrote some really good books in the 19th century. And Thoreau ended up in jail for civil disobedience because they wanted to take his land by Walden Pond. And Emerson came down and was like, hey, yo, Thoreau, why are you in jail? And Thoreau looked and was like, why are you not in jail? That's my question for the rest of the commission. Why were you not in jail?
No, I mean there were some other people that were down there. Eric Cunningham, he was there, he went down there and spoke. Then there were some other people who was down there when I was down there. it's telling that they went at 6:30 the next morning because they didn't want to be filmed on camera, arresting and or breaking up the encampment of people who are homeless. You know, they later that day, Channel 3 was showing the bulldozer, literally like the bulldozers and the big trucks that they had, you know, packing up the donations that people were giving to them, the tents, throwing them in big garbage.
Yeah, man.
And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, so Kalamazoo. Earlier on this show that we talked about, Kalamazoo had $250,000 that they could spend that was supposed to be given to the poor and disenfranchised in our community. That $250,000 did not go to affordable housing for people who are homeless. It didn't go to expanding like the mission and the different shelters here in Kalamazoo for people who are homeless. It didn't go towards Loaves and Fishes and other community-based programs that's supposed to help people who are poor and disenfranchised. So instead of treating these people with humanity and respect, you're or spending the money to help these people so they are not put in the situation that they were in by having to have a tent city in the park. You're going to take the little valuables that they do have, and you're going to discard them.
That were donated by the rest of the community, man.
No, but that's the point. You're going to take away the valuables that they do have, the little bit that they do have, and you're basically telling them to leave because you don't like the fact that they're in the park.
And that's it, man. They don't like the fact that they're in the park because the city has offered other spaces for encampments, but. You know, like I think I said this a couple weeks ago, but you know, the city, they had it all back asswards. The reason there was a camp in the park is because it is visible, because it's something that you can't ignore. And yeah, I'm sure there were a lot of people out there, a lot of the kind of whinier white liberals, hoity-toity people who didn't really either lack in empathy or class consciousness, who wanted them out of there. But fact of the matter is, that camp was first and foremost a protest. And frankly, I think that might end up biting the city back in the butt. There was actually a recent federal court case that said it is illegal for local governments to in any way criminalize homelessness when they do not have local capacity to make sure that all of them have a bed. Kalamazoo Gospel Mission, by definition, can't count because it's a religious institution. So the city basically just opened itself up to a really scathing and probably expensive civil rights lawsuit. I know people have already been in contact with the ACLU and other groups like that. So, you know, my advice to the city is, like, I don't know where it stands with the negotiations with the homeless folks right now, if the demands are going to be filled. My advice to the city is, like, you fill those demands as quickly as you possibly can. Otherwise, you're going to be slapped with a hell of a lawsuit.
No, here's my thing. I'm not going to lie. Some of the demands were a little crazy. Like, they was a little wild. Like, I'm not even going to sit here and pretend like some of those demands are reasonable.
The initial ones were a little bit more. Excuse me. The initial ones were a little bit more out there. I'd say they did whittle them down to like 5 really tangible ones. The 2 that are really on the plate right now are making sure they have like a structure before wintertime that can act as a de facto shelter, and for Kalamazoo to work on a housing first policy for the long term. And then, there's a third one. And the third one is making sure that the city networks and provides mental, physical, healthcare supports to the homeless. And there were moves to go forward on all of those 3 demands. But yeah, no, you're right. Like, and I think that's part of the reason, like, you know, the camp itself had to go through its growing pains and come to a list of like reasonable, tangible demands that really would tackle the homeless problem.
I think the other thing is that another story that came up while you were gone was the housing one of the solutions that Kalamazoo is doing as a proposal is tearing down Up and Unders, which is the local bar that's near the north side, to build affordable housing. Affordable housing downtown that's in the range between $300 and $900. And
that actually sounds kind of good, but I bet there's a big catch. Right?
Here's the thing. Housing downtown is not going to be between $300 and $900. Like the fact that an overwhelming majority of Americans in Kalamazoo make the federal minimum wage, so that's $7.50. For those who are bad at math, that's $15,000 a year. I mean, that's $1,500 a year. So you're not going to be. Most people are not going to be able to afford that kind of housing to begin with, and the fact that you have these people who are already poor and disenfranchised, you could spend that money. I implored and beseeched them that they should build affordable housing, but we need to be realistic on how are these people going to not only pay for it, but what kind of demands are we putting on them to do so. And that's the thing that made me upset about the protest, because if the city is allowing the encampment to be somewhere where they designate that they're okay with, then that's no longer a protest. A protest is supposed to be designed where it's an inconvenience, that it brings attention and awareness to people who normally would not see it. That's what a protest is designed to do. A protest that's allowed by the city, that the city is okay with, that they encourage to be in a certain place at a certain time, is not a protest. That is a parade. And if you're okay with a parade, then you are ignoring the reason why they're having these issues in the first place. You're ignoring the reason why we have these we're having these issues, because it's not it undermines the core issue that we're having in our city. And the reason why our city was voted number 37 in one of the worst cities in the United States. Is
it in poverty or to be homeless in? I'm sorry.
No. But that goes back to my point that I just made. Is like the city allowed them to be. Was allowing them to be in a certain place at a certain time, and that's where they can have their encampment. So it's not on the forefront. It's not in a place where everybody can see it. So a protest is designed, and I just explained this. I'm gonna say it again. The protest is designed for people who are not normally visually see these things. It's for people who are unaware. So you're supposed to be disruptive. You're supposed to be in the forefront of people's visual perspective.
Right.
If you are being allowed to be somewhere at a certain place at a certain time, and the city allows you to do so, that's no longer a protest. That's a parade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as much as they talk about like Bronson Park, I mean, that was the perfect location to do it. I see a lot of these more like conservative folks complain about I can't take my kids to play down in Bronson Park. It's like there's no playground equipment there. That's not where you take your kids to play around at. It's where people go to like sit down during the day and have lunch. People go to see some stuff in the band shell. People go to like walk their dogs there and stuff. You could have a protest encampment there that's really highly visible without really disturbing the typical business of the city.
You can, if you want a playground, that's why they created Arcadia. Like, you have Arcadia. You have some of the other camps around. You have some of the other parks around Kalamazoo. The fact that you have it downtown meant that because the city commission board and our government is also downtown, that they would have to see they're failing at all time.
Yeah,
they don't
exactly.
You know what I'm saying? If you have a public blemish, they don't. You want to hide it. and you can't hide this.
That's been their top priority since day one, the city government, that is. In all of the negotiations, the first thing they would ask is like, so what do we got to do to get you out of the park? What do we got to get you out of the park? Da 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 da.
No, but that's the thing that, and this is the last thing that I just want to say about the camp, because there's a bunch of stuff that we need to talk about. I get that people have demands, and I get that everyone in America is struggling. I understand that. Half the country can't deal with a $400 emergency. Over 62% of the country cannot deal with a $400 emergency. Over 20 million people in America are still uninsured. I get that we have these problems, and I get that there are regular people who are struggling with this stuff every single day. Please remember there are people who have it worse than you. And these are the people who have it worse than you, and
we're all just that medical emergency away from going down the camp down there across from Shakespeare to run the gospel mission.
Right, man. and that's the point that I'm trying to get at. As a Christian, the Christ said, "What you do for the meekest and weakest, what you do for the least among you, you do for me," and that's the way that I think about this. I look at this. I'm like, dog, our nation in the history of Kalamazoo, this is going to be looked at years from now when our kids have kids, and we're gonna have to talk about, how did we treat the people who are less fortunate than the rest of us? How did we treat the downtrodden and homeless? Well, they had an encampment, and we kicked them out of our visual prowess and visual perspective, and we told them to go somewhere else because we wanted to use that space.
Yep, and I guess the big question is, are the citizens of Kalamazoo, and I guess the city, actually going to do something to solve this problem or not? I think that's still up in the air, because we could use this as an opportunity to really... I had a national organizer come in and look at this encampment, and what he told me is you could turn this into a focal point about the national discussion around homelessness, and I think we still could do that, but we got to be vigilant, and particularly with our city government that really values the whims of the kind of white upper middle class of the city rather than the people who have the least of us. It's going to be a fight. And we got to be ready to do that. I mean,
to quote Lee Camp, this is not about Jeff Bezos, but Jeff Bezos has enough money to end homelessness for the next 25 years. Oh, yeah, and you could say that about Bill Johnson or William Parfett or any of the Upjohns. Our own city billionaires could easily fix this problem. They could allocate some of that excellent money towards this issue, but I don't see them doing it. I mean, we're building new apartments and stuff across the street from the Radisson. Yeah. Are you? If our city is dancing with the idea of building a new stadium downtown or a new event center downtown, you cannot then tell me that we do not have the money to give the homeless in our community a place to stay. You could have the old dorms that Western are not using, and they could ship some of those old dorms downtown and have that be the place where homeless can go. We could design something similar to that, to a college dorm room situation for the homeless in our community. It's very simple. It's similar to the solution that they did in Utah, in Seattle, and the situation that they're doing across our country. We can follow suit, and we'll be better off for it.
All right, and I want to pick up on time. We got our last segment. We're probably gonna spend the last half hour on. We're talking about Bill Cosby and Kavanaugh and a lot of the. Do you got to get going, Lawrence?
You know what? I can stay.
Stay a little bit?
I can stay and talk about it.
Okay. And I did want to leave off with just a quick... this is from a really, really good article published by MLive in the Kalamazoo Gazette. And it really puts a human face on what's going on with this protest encampment. And I thought this particular excerpt kind of leads in pretty well to our next topic. So this article, look it up, Why I'm Homeless, 7 stories from members of Kalamazoo's community. Find it, look it up, share it. It's one of the best pieces I've seen come out of this, pieces of journalism come out of this protest. But I wanted to read this excerpt. Michaela Ford, 23, said everything in her life has crumbled. Ford has lived in Kalamazoo for 2 months. She was recovering from addiction at a Meridian Health facility in Detroit for being put on a bus to Abigail's Place, a women's substance abuse shelter in Kalamazoo. Last week, she was sleeping in a tent outside a city-owned building on Cedar Street. Ford left Abigail's Place for a toxic relationship with an ex-boyfriend in White Pigeon, her hometown. After 2 days, she realized her mistake and returned to Kalamazoo. She stayed at the Gospel Mission for a few weeks, but left after developing a skin infection that she believes was caused by unsanitary conditions at the shelter. She complained of bed bugs, head lice, and cockroaches in the women's shelter. It was just nasty and traumatizing, she said. I felt like a dog. I felt like an animal, and I was just trying to build. Instead, I was treated like I wasn't worth anything. I was sleeping on the floor with bugs. Ford gained a job at the Comfort Inn, but didn't make enough money to afford an apartment, so she started sleeping in Bronson Park. She earned $400 a month. A medical emergency cut off her only source of revenue. Ford's appendix was removed 2 weeks ago. Ford feared another infection while recovering from surgery at the mission. For now, she camps at Cedar Street while working to find shelter. Ford ran her hands through her short hair while talking to reporters near her tent. The worst part is feeling dirty, she said, to wear stinking clothes and sit in the heat. Ford is running low on hope. She is mentally and physically drained, making her search for stability a seemingly insurmountable task. I know some people don't want to work, but I do, she said. All I want to do is work and have my home. Now we're going to take a quick little break. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo.
Be apparent, but hunger is a rather prominent issue amongst the student body of Western. The Invisible Need Project is a multifaceted initiative that's aimed to help struggling students.
Every 2 weeks, generous people donate their food to the pantry located in the Fawn Student Service buildings or other drop-off locations. All you need to do is grab a reusable bag and grab whatever food you need to help sustain yourself. If anyone's unsure when their next meal will be, or if you have a little extra food you'd be willing to donate, the food pantry is your place. If you're looking to help donate, become a volunteer, or just learn more, call 269-387-4742 or email dosa-inp@wmich.edu for details.
This is Maria Bamford. Oh no, I screwed it up. Okay. This is Maria Bamford, and you're listening. No, I did it again. This is Maria Bamford, and you're listening to WIDR-FM.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. This is Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. Joined by a good friend of the show, repeat offender when it comes to coming down here and dropping all those truth bombs. It's Miss Jessica Martin. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. And partly on the show because, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on in the news, particularly what's been going on with the allegations against Brett Kavanaugh, who's the the young man that's Trump is trying to push through the Supreme Court right now. Well, not even so much Trump, but the rest of the GOP. And this is a dense topic. There's a lot of stuff to really unpack and talk about. And particularly when we're talking about the allegations against him. What really struck me, and I think I talked to you a little bit about this the other day, is there's a very recent history with this. We think back to the early 90s with Anita Hill and what happened at those hearings, where you essentially had a bunch of old white men tearing down this woman, talking about these allegations. And I don't know if maybe that's kind of a place to bounce off and talk about kind of what has been brought up in the recent discussions about why don't women come forward? Why is this coming up just now? And I thought, this is something that maybe you'd want to speak to, Jessica, because I know it's something you've been very vocal about as of late.
Really, when it comes down to why do you wait, I think it's pretty obvious, and people don't want to admit what the obvious is. Go ask yourself, if you've never had this happen to you, what's the first question you ask a victim? And it's usually, what were you doing? It's usually immediately victim blaming. And for society to be sitting here having so many of us survivors and victims continuously saying it's because you blame us, it's because you attack us and you protect our predator, is saying that they don't get it. I don't believe that anymore. I don't accept it. At this point, it's cognitive dissonance that's the problem. And that's why we aren't coming forward. It's because we have a society that, instead of rallying around their fellow people who are being harmed by the people that are supposed to be in charge, that are supposed to be some of the most ethical people we're supposed to have, right? Right. Society just cowers. They turn a blind eye because it's either party loyalty or, the bro code, or fear themselves to stand up, which then leaves the victim to themselves to fight back. Myself, in speaking up, I've gotten braver because I've gotten support. It's blatantly just what it is. Like the memes of Ford right now, and those men just lining up with clubs, and it's like showing that she's metaphorically being beaten up right now by, again, a bunch of white men who, frankly, statistics show the majority of them probably have not been raped. There's probably some in there that have been, but the odds are very slim. And as far as males go, they definitely aren't going to speak up. Which you could say, they're speaking up now against the priests, and everyone's like, oh, I'm so sorry, this is horrible. And then you have, Anita Hill, you have Ford, you have, in general population all over the place, women coming out, being triggered by these people all of a sudden being back on the TV or having their name back in their life, and they're being attacked. So why would I want to come out? Why would I want to come out and say this is what's happened? When I went to the police about my friend raping me, they said I shouldn't have been drinking. They said that I knew he had a thing for me, and I shouldn't have put myself in that situation. And these are also police officers that I had known my whole life, that I went to school with, that helped raise me. It was extremely degrading and dehumanizing, and you already have that happen to you. So when it continuously happens after that, it makes you feel like nothing. It makes you feel like you do not matter to anybody, and why speak up at that point?
I mean, it's the same thing. It's the same thing that's what you just described is America in general. Right. I mean, let's be clear. Mm-hmm. Look at the situation with the young man that was shot in his own apartment.
Yep.
Like what did America do? What did the media do immediately after a unarmed man was shot in his own apartment? They found a way to blame him for his own death by saying he had marijuana in his apartment, which they did not say if it was his or not. But victim blaming and blaming your victim, blaming your trauma on things that you have done on the victim themselves, that's as American as apple pie and bald eagles. Like, you know what I'm saying? Let's not get it twisted. What we're fighting in these situations now is that people are no longer just going to stand by and take it. And that's the thing that we are seeing now. The thing with Kavanaugh that makes me angry is when I look at the GOP, we have a president that's has sexually assaulted people, a president that backs pedophiles and other sexual assaulters. So I mean, like, again, it's not something that's uncommon. That's, again, as American as apple pie, baseball, and bald eagles. Like, that's just how our system has been for years.
Unfortunately true. And, you know, I think it's excuse me, starting to really expose some of the cracks there. Now, I was going to pivot to another question, but I mean, Jessica, it looks like you wanted to jump in with something. Is that...
There's been new developments today with the Kavanaugh case. They're voting on Friday.
Oh, they are?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And your comment about Trump hasn't really been pushing him through so much. Trump pushed him through today. Which is not surprising at all to me. So all three women have agreed to...
There's supposed to be a fourth.
Yes, there's supposedly. We'll see what happens. I have a feeling there's far more than that. So he's going to be voted on come Friday. I think they think that tomorrow isn't going to go how they feel. And if you're interested, there are direct actions going on tomorrow. There's none in, like, around us. You're going to have to go to Chicago or Detroit. I just found out about this myself. So, and it's to encourage them to not vote him in or to completely cancel the vote. So I just thought that was extremely important to put out there, that it was canceled last week, and as of today, we are going to be seeing the vote occurring Friday at, I think, 8:30 in the morning.
Man, that roller coaster, man.
Here's the thing, and this is the thing that pisses me off about the Democrats. The Democratic Party refuses to fight. Our president and his and people that he's associated with are under federal investigation. You have someone who's been accused of sexual assault on multiple
there's a reason why.
Oh yeah. You have people. You have our president who's been accused by multiple women of sexual assault, putting someone on a lifetime job, who's also been accused of sexual assault. And if I was the Democratic Party, I would say no, until the FBI actually does a thorough investigation of all these things, we cannot allow this to happen. And if I was the Democrats, I would say no, there's no other legislation that will be being done. When it came to them increasing the military budget, they could have said, no, we're not going to vote on this. We're not voting on any of these things to make sure that our government and our standard of operating normality is going to keep functioning unless we address some of these things that's going on. The problem is our Democratic Party will not do so.
No, it's because they have people themselves that have the same problems that are being accused of the same thing, so they don't want to shed light on something and then have it turn into, well, you're doing it too.
No. It's not just that. A recent story just came out of Chuck Schumer. Basically, Chuck Schumer and the other Democratic leadership is basically letting Trump forward through judges that he wants. So one out of seven judges that are going to be our federal judges will be appointed by Donald Trump, and they're basically pushing them through so that the Democrats can go back home and fundraise.
And exactly. And the kind of judges you're seeing him appoint are people that are monstrous on women's rights, who, you know, particularly in the case of Kavanaugh, and I wanted to kind of like pivot the discussion a little bit this way, is, you know, a lot of what's coming to the surface about Kavanaugh right now is like his behavior, particularly when he was in college. And, you know, we're broadcasting out of a college station right now.
Yeah.
And all of these people are saying, it's like, oh, it was years ago. Boys will be boys, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, this guy was a grown man in college when he was going around committing sexual...
I wanted to talk about this and the maturity levels of what we see women versus men at. Like, you're saying that a 15-year-old girl should have known better and had the maturity level to not be in a situation that she was in. Yet you're saying that a 20-year-old man shouldn't have known better and was just behaving how boys behave. Like, the difference is that we hold against male to female, especially when it comes to maturity level, and what you're supposed to, your responsibility level is to me, as coming from a female, is starkly different. Like, men get that pass of, well, you know, boys will be boys, but women don't get that pass unless we're being emotional, and it's more so to have it so that we can be silenced when we get to a certain point, not to give us a pass.
I mean, it's not just that level of biasness, but it also goes to who's the person that's being accused.
Right.
Like, I mean, a 17-year-old with a joint can go to jail for years and or decades.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And you have a person who's convicted of raping someone going to jail for 3 months.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, the injustice in our criminal justice system is largely based off of the same thing that our healthcare system is based off of. How much money and power do you have? That will directly impact how you are affected by these things that everyone has to abide by in our country. So if I was, there are young black men, there are young men of color, or poor and disenfranchised people who are in jail right now for non-violent drug offenses.
Mm-hmm.
Yet you have people like Roy Moore or people like Kavanaugh, who are Harvey Weinstein, you know, Bill O'Reilly, still walking around free in the public.
It's not
you know
even,
what I'm saying? Like,
it's not even just wealthy people. I mean, coming from my standpoint, I had a judge deny me a PPO against a blatantly abusive person and put on my PPO that I was abused, just not enough in the last year. So I was denied my PPO, and I was told, it's on a piece of paper, I was told that I could come back and fight him in court, and they tried telling me that they knew this guy they've never met better than me, that he wouldn't show up and the odds are I'd win. This guy showed up to a default divorce just to intimidate me. Like,
oh man,
it's at every level. But what the thing that is there is that this guy was white, his dad was kind of known, and his cousin is a police officer for Van Buren County.
Oh yeah.
So
I mean, you're absolutely right. And like those power discrepancies when it comes to like the mixture of like involvement in your local community and whiteness and patriarchy. I mean, those happen. I mean, as you just illustrated right here at the local level too. You know, we talk a lot about Kavanaugh being protected because he was like a kind of a white, well-to-do person going to a good college, and they tolerated a lot of that predatory behavior, even celebrated it in some really gross ways.
It's not just, it wasn't just him. Think of the Stanford student that raped the girl who was behind the dumpster.
Yeah.
He only got, he was supposed to go to jail for a year. He ended up doing 3 months on house arrest or some garbage.
The judge didn't want to ruin his life.
Right. We talked about it. We talked about a story on this show a month ago of some kids literally hanging a black kid on a playground, and yet they did not want to victimize the white kids that were bullying the black kid because it might ruin their college opportunities. Again, it goes back to we've seen these things played out in American society, not just with Kavanaugh. We've talked about these type of stories of injustice all the time. The problem is the question is who's in power to do something about it, and what are they being influenced by to make sure that they're accountable in doing something about it? Because if I make money off of the backs of people who are poor and disenfranchised, then maybe my economic stability is dependent on this injustice system staying the way it is. So I mean, and that goes back to a lot of things that we've talked about on the show a bunch of times.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm just what he was saying and all of that. But to me, the focus is right now trying to get people to listen about what exactly we're doing at a societal level to influence our government. To me, that's what this discussion keeps routing back to is we like to try to say our government is constantly doing this to us. Our government is constantly doing this to us. But what are we doing to influence our government to stay that way? Because certain groups of society do profit more from it being this way. Like, I know darn well that I could call the police and say, there's this guy that was doing something bad, and all I have to say is that he's a person of color, and they're going to be there because I'm white. I can call on that, and they aren't going to do anything.
Well, they're not going to do anything. They're not going to do anything to you.
To me, yeah.
But to me, though.
Right. And society sees this, and what do we do about it? But there's certain ones of us that benefit from it, so we don't want to push it too hard. And we'll say, it's wrong, but we aren't going to fight extremely hard. And that's what I'm seeing right now is there's hundreds of women taking over in D.C. right now to protest Kavanaugh. And I'm not seeing a lot of it going on here. I'm not seeing a lot of people speaking up against this, saying, we shouldn't have this guy as in our Supreme Court. He shouldn't even be a judge in general, if you're asking me.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And we do have a board of 10 Democrats who are pushing, in my opinion, not hard enough to have an investigation into all of these women. We have Christine Blasey Ford, we have Deborah Ramirez, and Julie Swetnick was the one that came out today. And I don't see their names going anywhere. I don't see anyone saying, I stand with her, I believe her. I don't see a lot of people wanting to take action on this. And it's kind of infuriating at this point. But again, we're talking about things at a local level too. To me, there's been major reflection on why it's not being done. And if you looked up Kalamazoo statistics about abuse and about rape and what the tolerancy is here in Michigan in general, we're rated pretty high for that. And I think that's why I think while we need to influence our government, how do we start influencing our society? How do we start really changing one another and assuring that men call out men? Not just, standing next to the victim, but when they see their friends doing something they shouldn't be doing, speaking up against it. And when a victim comes out, society actually rallying with them.
Well, let's recall, a lot of these stories about Kavanaugh in college, both, the permissibility that allowed him to do these things and the fact that these women were silenced about it for so long were directly because those were the cultural expectations that existed at the college they were at, and that really do still exist a lot today. That's what's being chipped away at and taken on so forcefully with excuse me, this Me Too movement. And while we still have time, I wanted to kind of broaden the discussion. We also found out very recently, Bill Cosby is going to be doing some hard time.
Not enough time.
He doesn't have enough. He doesn't have a lot of time on this earth.
He should be there until the time of Earth is done for him.
He literally is. He's 80. He's 86. He has 3 to 10 years. In 10 years, he will be 96. Most people don't live past 72.
Well, we'll see. He did eat a lot of Jello, so.
Right?
Anyway, sorry.
I'm sorry to cut you off.
That it's that way for everybody, regardless of their age. If you were to look up people that actually get charged for rape and for domestic violence, and the charges they get, like you said, they aren't what they should be. You're throwing people in prison for a joint. And prison means more than a year. I know you know that, but our listeners probably don't. And jail is a year or under. And you're getting people who have raped people, who have done horrid things that are getting jail time or, 3 to 10 years. Right, probation. And other things that people don't understand is time served and good behavior and all these options that you have to get out of there. And then you have the victim sitting here saying, please, in that time that he's in there, let him get done to him what he did to us, which is wrong. But that's how it feels right now. That's how it feels, is he's never. And if you look up the statistics of rape in jail, it's terrifying.
It's okay. So two things. One, rape in general, if it's in jail or not in jail, is still horrible, and it needs to be talked about, because male rape is a thing that does happen too. But I do need to talk about the fact that it's ironic that Bill Cosby's going to jail, but Harvey Weinstein, Bill O'Reilly, Donald Trump, the list goes on and on and on and on.
I've got one on my phone.
Of other sexual offenders that are not going to jail.
Right.
They're not being held accountable for their action. But everybody's celebrating this victory, and it also goes back to America's society. We love to see a successful black man. I hate identity politics, but I'm bringing this up for this one point. America loves to see a successful black person fall, and they love to see that fall from grace, and they love to celebrate it. Yet when you have successful white people, white males in particular, do the exact same thing and or worse, they do not receive that same type of justice. We do not have that same type of energy for the people who are named.
And we don't have the same type of justice that, I may not get a lot of justice, but I still know darn well that white women get more justice than any other women.
Yeah.
If we want to talk about inequality and justice, and that's another reason why a lot of women don't come forward, like the statistics do not reflect the truth of what's going on. The people who come forward are the more likely the people that feel they'll be heard and have a chance to fight back. And in this system, it's been proven time and time again that people of color in general are not treated well at all.
I do want to bring up this one last thing, and I'm sorry, Andy, I know you wanted to hop in, but it's the hypocrisy that bothered me with Bill Cosby. Now, again, as D.L. Hughley once said, two things can be true at the same time. He was a fantastic philanthropist. He was a fantastic comedian. He did things. He broke the mold and opened the door for a lot of my favorite comedians to do the things that they're doing today. And he was a great philanthropist. That's all true. He also raped a bunch of women. You know what I'm saying? And he was doing it at the tender age of 67 and younger. And he would continue to do it well into his old age. So, if you could, as D.L. Hughley once said, Lucifer was in heaven and then he got kicked in hell. So, if you can mess up in heaven, you can mess up in Harlem. You know what I'm saying? So, for Cosby, it's upsetting because he shouldn't have done the things that he did in the first place. And the fact and the hypocrisy that he had when he would go around telling the black community, well, you need to pull your pants up, or you need to behave like this. The holier than thou type of attitude that he had towards his own community, that's the thing that pissed me off. Because I'm like, while you're trying to tell young black people how they should or should not behave in a society that does not treat them like human beings, you're telling them to pull their pants up because you don't like them sagging. Okay, fair enough. That's your opinion. You should have pulled your pants up too.
Yep.
And let's keep it real.
And I did want to jump back to you, Jessica, real quick. I just want to bring up this point that, one of the things I saw Cosby's own lawyer saying today was that, one, he framed it as like, we're in the same battlefield as Kavanaugh. So it's like he's trying to... He really said that? Yeah. It's like trying to appeal somehow to like the people who are on Kavanaugh's side, who are trying to like push back against these women. And also the fact of the matter that, Cosby and his attorney are like very savvy, and they're trying to push this narrative of like being like a racial martyr when most of the women who step forward to accuse Bill Cosby are black women. So it's this weird dynamic where, you have Cosby going down in like our society a lot. Of course they allowed like the black millionaire to actually get real jail time first. But at the same time, it's crazy to see this powerful man trying to side with this other despicable, powerful man, while at the same time throwing black women under the bus.
Oh, no. The identity politics is always played when it comes to defending disgusting ideology. Mm-hmm. Identity politics is always played that. Clarence Thomas saying that what he did to Anita Hill, and then he said it was a high-tech lynching. So yeah, he played the identity politics card because of what he did was wrong. What he did was wrong. Mm-hmm. But to deflect from what he did was wrong, he could bring up the fact that he's a black man trying to get a seat on the Supreme Court. The fact that Bill Cosby saying that, oh, I'm sorry, I interrupted and I jumped in. I apologize for that. The fact that he's connecting himself to another disgusting human being and saying things like this is the most racist trial ever and things like that nature, because I think he also said that earlier this week, which I thought was hilarious, takes away from the actual struggle and the actual oppression that other people are having in this in our society. It reminds me of the Boondocks cartoon when Huey had to go in front of the court during the R. Kelly trial and explain to everyone there, bruh, yeah, he's successful, but we have standards. we have he's not a hero just because he's going to a trial, because he's a black man that goes to trial. Like, no, the government does put a lot of black innocent people in jail, but he's not innocent. He's not one of them.
So I want to kick it to Jessica, and I obviously just respond to anything else we've talked about, but I also want to kind of ask too, like, some people talk about this as like a victory for like the Me Too movement, and
which one?
Cosby. But I kind of wanted to get from you, like, how does that ring true or ring hollow for you, and what do you think about it in the context of like what's going on with Kavanaugh and the Me Too movement more broadly?
I don't see it as a success for exactly what well, I see it as a success, but I also see it for what it actually is, because like Lawrence said, if we're just prosecuting rapists, then Kavanaugh would be prosecuted. The investigation would be going forward. To me, we're still missing a key value to the Me Too movement, and that's that all of us that are involved in this Me Too movement matter, and that there are women out there that are far less likely to get justice due to their perpetrator, being of a certain color or of a certain class, or them being of a certain color or a certain class. So to me, that's where it's not really like there's justice, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like full justice. We would be doing it to everybody, and that's what, to me, this should really, really expose. And the Cosby team reaching out to Kavanaugh's team just kind of really cracks me up, because the odds of Kavanaugh and his team not being racist themselves and actually wanting to help them.
Oh, you had the assistant making the okay gesture. Which,
right.
Talk about that, but
that's my point. No, it's a step forward to what's right, and it encourages us and gives us enough hope to keep fighting. But I do think that the women that are involved in this movement and our allies need to step back and start addressing inequalities within the movement, and that will make us start to address inequalities as far as prosecution goes. How we treat one another, how we treat our community is how it reflects that we want to be treated. And I personally want any person that's been assaulted, abused, or raped to get justice, the same level of justice that I would hope to receive, regardless of their skin color or class.
Oh, so. Yeah. No, I agree. And,
Does that answer that?
Oh, yeah. No, that's a great answer. Excuse me. So my throat's still a little messed up from my trip, the allergies in New Mexico. Oh, we were running a little bit into overtime on this, but, I don't mind that. This is a really important topic. I just wanted to make sure, so in the context of Brett Kavanaugh and, what do you think this kind of tells women, and especially like the young women who might be listening here who are students at Western, about how their voice matters and what might happen to them if they speak up, and just in general, if you might have any words for those folks?
Right now is a time where there is something happening that hasn't been happening. You have more survivors and victims coming out with their truth and putting their hands and arms out to you. So if you want to come out with your truth, and you don't necessarily want to do it via Facebook or, very publicly, there are those of us out here who will help you. We will stand with you. You put it out there. I believe the victim first. And I want you to know that if you're out there and you have been harmed and you want anybody to hear your story, my name's Jessica Martin, and I'll try my best to be there for you. I am a victims' rights advocate, and I have resources that I can help get you to help you heal and be around a community that is much like yourself, where you won't feel so lonely. It's perfectly natural to be afraid to speak up. There is no reason to feel ashamed that you're not speaking up. You tell your truth when you're ready, whether that be today or in 30 years. Your truth is valid no matter what, as are you. Sorry, this is kind of making me cry.
That's all right.
No, you're fine. And that those people that did that to you, they mean nothing. That they have a very sad life, but that doesn't mean you should feel sorry for them. That there's nothing that's excused their actions. You're 100% valid, and you deserve to be heard. So if you go tell your story and somebody didn't listen, keep telling your story. If there's anything I've learned, it's keep reaching out, keep fighting, and you will be heard. You will get that support that you need. You will find those people, but it takes almost the same amount of pain that you went through when it occurred to you. And it takes a lot of strength and courage to do that. And not doing it doesn't mean you don't have that. It just means you aren't ready, and that's okay. Be patient with yourself, love yourself, and try to get some sort of help if you can. That's what I would like to say, because the statistics that I've read of what's going on Western and what's going on in Kalamazoo are absolutely repulsive. And I know that the police are not that safe when it comes to this, that you don't want to call a cop. So again, if you're in an uncomfortable situation, you can call me. I'll come get you. I will do whatever you need. There are other people out there that are willing to do that. I know personally that I've called cops here and been treated horridly, and so have others, and those horror stories are out there. And that it's very legitimate to not want to call a police officer. The first thing that usually occurs is victim blaming, and you won't get that with other survivors. And that's the other message I'd like to put out there, is I'm looking for more people to do this with me, to be willing to go get survivors of domestic violence out of their situation, or someone out of an assault situation. So I think it's time that society fights back, since our justice system won't.
All right, well, thank you so much, Jessica. And I don't know if was there anything else you wanted to talk about while we're still here on air?
I don't care. I would kind of like to touch on local issues the same.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I will make it quick, because some people have heard about it, and I know some people are wondering, and it's part of what's fueled my fight. We have the same problem happening locally, and that's what I was trying to mention earlier, that as we do at a federal level, we have people in our very own area willing to protect predators over victims. People who have been aware of situations occurring and have personally attacked myself. They've attacked you. They've attacked other people and tried to silence them. They've claimed us liars and invalidated us. So some of this this fight is personal for a lot of us, all the way from local to federal. But if you're here and listening to this, the one thing I have to say as a victim of that person is you still have the ability to step out and be on the right side. And there is a right or wrong side. Silence is violence, and there's been a lot of silence occurring. And there's been a complete lack of accountability. There has been no apologies to any victims. There has been no action taken, and there's not really a push by our activists besides those, yourself, and like 4 others, I think, that are really heavily pushing that this is wrong and we need to protect our community. We need to assure that we get people into government that are not predators, that do not enable predators themselves. Because if you look at our rape statistics, if you look at our domestic violence statistics in Kalamazoo County, it is terrifying. And it reflects what we allow in our own communities. It reflects what we do not speak out against. And what it's reflecting is that we will protect our friends. We will protect our family. We will protect somebody that'll go do business for us. We will not protect the victim, though, even if they are our friend or our family. And that will continue from local all the way up to federal unless we start causing change locally. Like the Kavanaugh vote is extremely important to stop, but we need to really remember to focus locally on what's happening here and what changes we can do here, which involves confronting a lot of local and self issues, which is really hard to do. But I do want to say that I believe in a community to be able to do that. That I've been reached out to and been getting support from people, and more people are coming out saying it was wrong and they're taking action on it. So that gives me a lot of hope. And I do want to say to the people that have helped cause this harm, and I know I've helped cause harm also, we need to discuss things and we need to figure out how to work forward, which involves both sides taking accountability and looking into themselves, and both sides helping one another grow, so that we can help do what we all say we want to do. And so I guess I could be more of a real ally. I have lessons to learn myself. And we aren't going to help our community as long as we're standing behind these people. As long as we are protecting them and naively thinking we can't be done.
Refusing to hold them accountable. Too.
Right.
Like, I don't think anybody has actually talked to this individual about what they've been doing or what they've been doing
some
wrong
have,
in the community.
and this individual, scapegoats and is excused, and they allow his excuses. When I turned around and said, well, I have the same disorders, I was completely dismissed, and I'm still being accused by people of being afraid of this person because of his disorders when I have the same thing going on with me, and that's the problem. You shouldn't be out in public speaking about these things and about these people who have already been traumatized. You definitely shouldn't be trying to threaten them and silence them. If you have the ability to stay out of the middle of something like that, then you probably should if it doesn't really involve you. And right now we have a whole bunch of people getting involved with things and causing more harm to the victims and causing people to have to stand up and say things that they don't necessarily want to say. And to me, that's wrong. I truly believe that victims should be able to step forward and speak when they want to speak, when they're ready to speak. And right now, I think a lot of people feel that this person's being forced upon us and that they have to stand up and speak their story and protect other people. And it's causing a lot of trauma. And that's my concern right now, is this is an epidemic. This is an epidemic from local all the way up to federal. And right now we have such a huge opportunity to change this. We have a major opportunity to step up and protect our youth and to protect it from not happening to other people. I'm terrified I'm going to hear that my nieces have had this done to them. I'm terrified that some little girl is going to come out, which we've already been having kids coming home saying that they've seen this guy with a plush on his genital areas walking around the school. We report it to the police.
Is that another story I missed while I was on?
Yeah.
Oh, God. Oh.
Yeah, there's predators all over Kalamazoo, and you call the police and they don't take it seriously, and it's because the community doesn't take it seriously. Like, I don't get how these kids could be walking to school like this and not a bunch of people stepping up to line the sidewalks to protect them. Again, society here, right where we're at, needs to step back and look at themselves and ask themselves what they're ready to confront. If you've done something in the past that's bad and you want to learn from it and grow from it, then come out and say it. But if you've done something that's bad, I think how King is saying, if we're going to make it where anybody who's sexually assaulted people can't be on the Supreme Court, then no males will ever be on court. I think that speaks volumes of the situation right now and why people aren't speaking up. I think there are people who have done bad things that don't want to, speak up and say, well, so-and-so's doing this and we need to do something about it, because they can turn around and spotlight them for doing the very same thing. It's a nasty cycle of abuse and blackmail. And we've already heard of plenty of people in this area who have been allegedly accused of these things. So we have a problem in Kalamazoo that needs to be addressed. Western needs to handle things better. They need to have more security phones. They need to allow women to carry pepper spray on them. I don't know if they've overturned that or not. And quite frankly, I'd like to see self-defense courses being taught.
And, Jessica, that was very powerful, and thank you for coming here to speak up. The only thing I could really add to that, because if you follow me personally, I talk about this a little bit more in depth on my social media and such. But one of the things that our community really needs to come to terms with is, I think, a lot of people in the activist community, and really the community more broadly, especially, I think this would also really ring true for a lot of the students and people in the Vine community who are listening right now. Conflict avoidance. It's what a lot of that boils down to, is that, accepting predators or not having conversations with people who are problematic boils down to conflict avoidance. It's that you don't want to create extra conflict, or as you would perceive it, extra conflict, or cause tension or drama in a situation that is already tense and dramatic by design. If you're dealing with a long-term protest, there's a lot of moving parts, and it's very complex, and you get to this point where you think it would be easier not to deal with this person, or to deal with this issue or this interpersonal conflict. And it is crucially important to deal with those things as they come along. And if we don't, then we are not walking the walk. We are simply talking the talk as a community that says, oh, we stand against misogyny and patriarchy and rapists. But if you're not actually doing that work in your own personal life to do it, then really you're not. You have to stand with victims, not just sit down and talk about victims' rights while the victims are being victimized.
Or quietly support us, and then when it comes to, the public attacking us, you stay quiet. Yet you'll send me a message and say, I think you're so brave and I support you. But when it comes to your colleagues, you're going to stay quiet. Like, I've been getting messages from people of screenshots being warned to stay away from this person. I've been getting, other messages from people saying, thank you for speaking up. This person's caused a lot of problems in my work life. And yet you don't see any of them speaking up and saying, yes, I was warned about this. This happened to me. And it's that cycle of fear and abuse. And when you're speaking locally, we are friends with, local government. We are friends with each other, and holding yourself accountable is hard. It's very hard, and it's terrifying. It makes you confront things, and again, that avoiding conflict. You even avoid self-conflict, which I've been very guilty of myself. I've had to do a lot of work. But the other thing that I've noticed about the community that we live in, especially in the Vine area, a lot of people are recovering from abuse or survived abuse. And it makes it harder for them to stand up when that occurs. Myself, I even struggle with that. I know everyone thinks that I'm just ready to confront and fight, and I'm really not. There's been plenty of times where I've been quiet where I shouldn't have, and I have caused harm to dear friends of mine, even in the last year in the activist community with this whole thing with Sam and Kelly and what's going on with that. I hurt somebody.
Can't remember the timestamp on that. That was a couple of months ago. Learn about it.
Well, kind of. This has been going on for me for about a year.
I meant the episode of the show where you talk about that was about a month ago.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
So, it took a lot of, because I'm in the victim advocacy work, and hearing that I wasn't doing it right and that I hurt somebody really made me have to step back. I went into like a whole thing of depression, and thank you to you and to other people who helped me confront parts of me. And I think that's the other issue that people have, is they don't trust their support group around them to reach out and help them through these things and to confront things and to do it in a gentle manner, not an abusive, forceful, you need to do this, do this, do this. Again, it's not just you not talking to other people, but you need to do some self-work too. And I really just want to encourage everybody to learn to heal. And if you're a trusting person for this, start reaching out to those people that you know are victims also, and just try to create that safe space for yourselves and start that healing. Because to me, I think the change that we're going to see happen is when more victims speak up, and more victims start speaking up when they feel more supported. And I've been finding that having that support from people that know what you've gone through because they've gone through something similar really helps. And again, I'm a constant resource for that. If I don't have the capacity, I'll let you know. But there are a few of us in this area that you can really reach out to, and you can just vent to us, and we'll help you reflect a little bit and get to what you need, because that's ultimately what we need to do. Is we need to heal from the inside to heal the outside. And a lot of us are still too broken and too hurt and traumatized and too self-absorbed to really do the work on the outside. So it goes even deeper than just doing community work and assuring that your friend is safe and gets home safe. It's also you doing your own work like you have and I have and others have. So
yeah, nobody's born out of like a woke egg. All right.
No.
Yeah.
No, I've done a lot of damage. I know that I myself I've had to face these facts because I've been isolated because of my behaviors. And I mean, I've been isolated because I've spoken the truth about this situation, but in other areas and in other circles, I understand that my toxic personality from not healing and from still self-projection was really big for me for a while. So that, to me, is why it's so key. I didn't even know a lot of stuff that I was doing was offensive until people who finally realized I'm actually pretty approachable were like, hey, just so you know, you did this and it really hurt me. And when you say that, it's different. And what we're doing right now by ignoring, staying silent, mocking, and attacking those of us who have come out hurts. I'm not going to lie. I'm extremely hurt by what's occurred. I've left activism predominantly. I don't lead our group anymore. And it's because not just locally, but statewide, there's this problem with ableist behavior and allowing predators, not only allow them to be in and be a part of things, but seemingly promoting them into power and into positions that scare other people off and keep certain areas protected. And at certain points, like you said on your status, this does feel a little strategic. Mm-hmm. You know,
triangulated, really.
Triangulated, yes. And again, I'm well aware that there are a lot of people down there that I've said truths about that aren't happy with me. And I get it. I shouldn't have phrased things in ways that I did. I'm still going to say my truth, and I still have every right to say my truth. And I'm not going to stop saying my truth. But a lot of this is fueled from a place of hurt. Not necessarily anger, it's hurt. And I know that hurt is able to heal. And I'd like to be able to heal this because I want to see our community heal. And I don't ever want to see somebody go through what I've gone through in this last year and a half. Ever. I have lost a lot of friends, people I thought were friends. I've put a lot of time and effort into a passion that I don't feel safe in anymore, that my friends are constantly having to defend me and fight for me, and it makes it where we can't fight for what we should be fighting for, our community. And it's really hurtful to know that to make it where things are better, to eliminate myself from the equation is what will at least make people work together a little bit more or try to see their way. And it's exhausted me having to stand up and fight this that much.
I have some slight disagreements on that, but that would probably fill out the rest of the hour. But
I love you, Andy. Yeah. But that's what I'm trying to say is all of this boils down to hurt. The person that attacked me was hurting. You know, not the person that made me, that was a predator to me. I'm sure he's hurting, but the empathy towards him from me is just gone. When he targeted my mom and my friends, it was gone. And I get that the other people are in a position of they had a chance for their cause to be heard and for their community to be fought for. But that does not excuse hurting somebody else like that. I'm not going to say I deserved that pain. I won't for a second say that I deserved any of this. I deserved to be talked to. I deserved to be reached out to. But I did not deserve isolation, threats, people flat out lying, saying they didn't know when all of us have written them and let them know, and having to put all of this on Facebook and make all of this crap that's happened to me so public to fight for what's right and to try to ensure that other people are safe, because he did expose domestic violence victims that were there. He did touch another woman when he shouldn't have. He did intimidate her. He did call the cops on her. He is a danger, and I was doing everything I could to speak out to protect people, not make myself the center of attention. That is the most infuriating thing to ever happen to me, is to be standing up for victims and saying this person's dangerous and be accused of wanting attention and trying to make the whole movement about me. That is not what's happening. And I won't take those accusations any longer. And I won't take the invalidations and the mocking any longer. You can delete a status, but I've already seen it. And you can't delete the messages that I've screenshot. And I shouldn't have to do this. I shouldn't have to feel like I need to put stuff online to get people to tell the truth and to not let this person in that community anymore. I understand that they had a, quote, reason to be there, but there was no reason to put this person in charge of a Facebook page. There was no reason to put this person in charge of live stream when there are countless other people there that you could have handed that phone to.
The Gazette live stream was probably the best one, actually, think about it.
Right, I agree. And that's where these problems are. We're saying this to these people and they won't even, say, you're right, I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have done this. It's the people who had no clue that are all of a sudden now finding out. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And, there was just when I put the screenshot up of this person knowing like a month ago or more, all there was, you're right, I guess I did know, I'm sorry. After attacking me online, after, tearing apart my character and another victim's character. And this was a person that I had extreme respect for, and so did a lot of other people. And so was the other person that has been trying to silence us and attack us. You have a position in this community where people are looking up to you, and you took this as an opportunity to do more harm to other activists because you thought it was going to lift your movement, all in the name of the cause. And now we're trying to blame myself and this issue and the others standing with me for the encampment not getting the correct attention and for things failing. I'm not going to take accountability for that. The accountability is on the leaders of that camp who had a dangerous person there and expected all of us who have been victimized by this person to put our trauma aside and go be around that person and constantly be triggered and endangered. That's what they expected. And it's on them for expecting that from victims and saying that I am using my privilege to not be there. I have the right to be safe, as does everybody else.
Yep, and it's a big schism, I think, it's really exposed like one of the underlying problems that's occurring in this activism community. And of course, that's not to say, what's going on with the homeless issue right now extends beyond simply the camp.
Yes.
And, those demands are still on the table. Yep. And there's actually going to be a city commission meeting on October 1st where they're organizing hopefully as many people as possible to come in there and talk to the city about what's going on and what's going wrong. My top priority personally is making sure, okay, the city's going to do this horrible thing where they stomp on the encampment. I hope that doesn't mean that they think they no longer have to address the issue.
Right.
Because I'll be damned, they have to address it, they have to fix it, and as far as I'm concerned, we better use this as a lesson to become like a leading force on homelessness. Anything less is going to be a slap in the face and something I'm going to be yelling at them pretty constantly for the next few years about.
Right. No, I agree. And I do care about the homeless situation. I'm rather infuriated that myself and others couldn't be down there and that we're actually, kind of driven from that camp. I've had multiple friends say that they weren't comfortable there because of him. I am pissed that I couldn't be there, that I couldn't be involved in having people ask me what's going on and not being able to answer and them asking me why. I'm going to say why, and so are other people. But the key issue at hand is the homeless camp. And I do really care about that, and I do really care about the rest of the streets being covered with the homeless. One of my first experiences moving to Kalamazoo was a homeless man hiding out in the corridor of my apartment on Stewart from the cold, who was freezing and overdosing. And I called 911 for him, and it had been 5 minutes, and I still hadn't heard any sirens or anything. I called again, and it had been another 5 minutes. So then I called again and said that he was actually dead. And he wasn't, but that's when they showed up. And the EMT said, "Oh, I thought you said that he was dead." And I said, "Well, he was close." And that was my first experience with Kalamazoo and how they treat the homeless. It's repulsive. It is absolutely repulsive. But if you're going to hold yourself to a standard to stand up for that community, you need to hold yourself to a standard to stand up for all communities, and to not be selective, to not say, we're just going to fight for this cause when all the causes are tied together. I think that's another huge issue that we are not willing to accept in the activist community, is how much of this is actually tied together. That a lot of the people in there are homeless from mental health problems and from growing up in homes that weren't safe, from running away. There were women there that were having to flee sexual abusers. Homelessness spans all communities. There's so many reasons why people end up homeless, and you don't get to pick from those different communities of who you're going to stand for. And to me, that's kind of what felt like was happening. And again, I have other frustrations that other people have also shared, we should have pushed this more into the streets of helping the other homeless that were on the streets and not really just at the camp. Mm-hmm. And again, if we had more resources to do that and people to do that at that camp, I know darn well you would have been willing to take food into other areas, and so would have I and other people, and we would have been happy to provide those resources. So this is where why this is causing a problem in the activist community is you're losing leaders, you're losing resources by choosing to fight for one thing and not for another. This is not a time where we fight one issue at a time. We have to treat it all like one big thing and just go at it, and all of us change who we are and grow when these things occur. This is an opportunity, and I don't think we are seizing an opportunity for the homeless or for us at this point. I'm really concerned that we aren't going to have what they deserve to help them. Yeah. I think that they're going to build some buildings and say that this is affordable housing when the people that are doing this don't even know what affordable housing is, because they make so much money.
This city has literally described $1,200 apartments as affordable housing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Really? So
just so you know where they're at.
So people that are fleeing situations and have no money are supposed to all of a sudden magically be able to, get these places. And that's what I'm saying is we do have a big fight against us coming up, and you can use every resource possible, but there's going to be this elephant in the room this whole time until it's actually handled. And we could all really fight this a lot better if we were all on the same page and we were all truly trying to work towards a fully healthy community.
Yeah, and something I I told one of the main camp or one of the organizers, allies of the camp, was this issue that has been brought to everyone's attention with the homeless. This could be the thing that rescues our city from the gentrifiers. I know that might sound really dramatic.
But it's not.
Their issue is our issue. Every person downtown who's having a harder time finding a job because they don't look the right way, whether it's because they're black or Hispanic or they dress too punk rock. People who are having a hard time finding housing where literally right now the edges of the Vine neighborhood and the north side closest to downtown are being chewed off slowly by companies like Berkshire Hathaway. We are inextricably tied into the destiny of the homeless in this city and what kind of city Kalamazoo is going to become. So it is so important to be involved in that fight and that struggle. But some advice I would give to anybody involved in activism who wants to get involved in organizing: don't ever sacrifice values for the quote unquote bigger picture. Right. You have to always include your values when you're organizing. You can't, pardon me, you cannot if something is problematic and something that you are involved with, you have to have the courage to call it out. And if you are an organizer and you hear about something problematic going on, you have to have the courage and determination and the strength to listen and to do something about it.
Right.
Because if you pick any issue, whether it's war, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's homelessness, if you throw it to the wayside and say, well, let's just let victims be victimized, we don't go forward at all.
Mm-mm. We're doing the very same thing we're saying we're fighting against.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
We are silencing people in our own movement for, quote, the benefit of another. And you can argue this till you're blue in the face. You don't have the right to do that to somebody. You don't have the right to create a movement to stand up and say, we're fighting for people. And if people want to join you and then be like, but we're not fighting for you. And that's exactly what this is. Like, how many women that were in that camp have actually been, like the woman that you read that story on, that have been sexually assaulted and were fleeing from that? They weren't safe there. And there were people that knew they weren't safe there. Leaders of our community. And that needs to change. That I'm not going to advocate Kalamazoo as a safe space at all until that changes. Anybody says, who do I reach out for to go help with this? I'm not going to put them anywhere. I'm not going to suggest anywhere, because I've seen just about every group go silent on this, but still acknowledge in other ways that this is occurring and asking for our help in other areas. And I'm here to say I'm done doing that. I'm not going to, call people out for you anymore. I'm not going to take the dirt that you bring to me and put it out there anymore and sacrifice myself anymore. I'm not going to risk arrest for you. I'm not going to do much more than say this movement's going on and you should care. I do not want to push people towards these groups until they all learn to become a safe space, because if they're silent about one person doing it in this group, they're going to be silent about it in their own group. And that, to me, that is the epidemic. That is the epidemic. You want to sit here and say you advocate for victims, then you have to advocate for all victims, not just victims of your issue. If you want to, talk about it, like you said, every issue that's out there has people in it that have survived abuse and sexual assault. People that are fleeing from other countries. Quite often the women are single mothers that are fleeing an abuser. And when it comes down to clearly the domestic violence movement, even in the clean water movement, I'm finding people that are survivors of that. It's everywhere. It's everywhere, and all of these movements and groups seem to have predatory people leading them, and people just accepting this and not speaking up. And I'm done asking why, because it can be you next, and you're going to want me to stand up for you, and that's how we should all think, is it could be me next, and I would want somebody to fight for me. So you got to fight for everybody if you're going to stand up to fight. You can't just pick and choose.
All right. Well, we actually went into some significant overtime with this show. I think it was very important to do so. Again, you can find us on YouTube, Hoodrat Strategist radio program. I want to thank you all for listening. I want to thank our guests on the show today, particularly Jessica Martin for coming to speak, as well as Andrew from Voters Not Politicians. Everybody at home, the preceding thoughts, views, and opinions were not necessarily those of 89.1 FM, WIDR Kalamazoo, or Western Michigan University. And I want to thank y'all. For listening. Have a great night. I don't know, Jessica, was there anything else you wanted to add before we sign off?
A huge thank you to all of those who do stand with us. And please, if you're able to make it to Chicago or Detroit, or even call, write, organize in your own area for tomorrow, please do. You're doing way more than trying to stop Kavanaugh. You are showing a whole community that they matter that has been shown that they don't matter. You're validating people that have been invalidated for a long time. So it's not just about fighting against politics, it's about helping empower people. So if you can do that. And again, thank you to everyone who stood by me through all of this. I'm sorry if I just brought more drama into your life. I would hope that those people can come and, confront me and talk to me instead of going and attacking my friends more. So, yeah, that's all I've got to say.
All right. Well, thanks again for listening, everybody, and keep on fighting for that revolution solution.